Welcome back, everybody. We had a day off yesterday, but we are back with the NHL DFS strategy show. Myself and Cliffy, and we're going to break it down. 4 games we've got to talk about for today, and a decent sized contest over on DK. FanDuel running their normal stuff, and then some good contests on our sponsor site as well that I'm already into. What's up, Cliffy? How you been since we last talked?
Been good. Took most of the weekend off from NHL DFS. It was just a couple bad slates. Remember, we had that 2-gamer on Saturday with the round robins, and then Sunday round robins plus the Leafs game. So it's mostly just watching and playing some esports. But I'm super excited now. Like the first round of the actual NHL playoffs is incomparable to almost anything else other than like maybe the first weekend of March Madness or something like that. So I'm like, and now that we have, in normal times, all the games would be on relatively the same time. Now we have them spread out all through the day. Like I'm not even excited for like half the matchups, and I'm just really, really stoked for the playoffs. So I'm ready to get going here.
Yeah, it's pretty sweet that the games are staggered too. Obviously, you wish there were fans there, but from a TV viewing experience, this is going to be a lot of fun. So we've got a couple interesting matchups, a couple less interesting matchups, but it should be pretty good, and it'll be fun for DFS. Hopefully, some of these contests can fill, and then we can continue to have some NHL DFS to play once we get into Showdown and stuff like that. Today's show is sponsored by Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports, the most trusted name in fantasy sports. Yahoo now has CSV upload, and this doesn't matter as much for NHL because the contests are smaller, a lot of 3 max, and I think it gets up to 10 max. But we do have CSV edit if you're looking to play like MLB or other contests like that, NFL when that comes around, NBA. They've got some multi-entry tournaments as well. So Yahoo's making it easier for you to play multiple lineups. If you want to claim up to $30 in Yahoo Sports rewards points, those YSRPs, by signing up, you can use promo code Awesemo. So we don't need to do a review on what happened.
Are you
The
sure you don't
last
want to
week.
talk about the Leafs losing?
Well, yeah. Do you want to talk about it at all? It sounds
I,
like you're pretty pumped about that.
Yeah, no, not overly. It was just, obviously now we have to kind of pay attention to Columbus coming into the Tampa series, and just like a little word of warning that Tampa and Toronto are not the same teams. Expect Tampa to clamp down a lot better defensively than the Leafs did. So, you want to look at the first round numbers, but you got to remember all those games came against the same team. So
Mhm.
they can skew things a little bit. So don't, try to look into trends too much when you're looking at the playing rounds.
Yeah, that's a good point to talk about. And real quick, our NHL ownership projections are free, as well as MLB ownership and NBA ownership projections. So if you just watched the MLB show, we forgot to mention this, but I just posted the link in chat. Free ownership projections today. Feel free to use these to your liking, and then use promo code NHL Strategy for 50% off your first week of any weekly pass. So one thing I'm looking at going into this next round, because I did want to have some data to at least weigh into my model a little bit for this round, because otherwise you're using stuff from 5 months ago, is just like the player counts, like which players are attempting a lot of shots, which players created a lot of shots in the first, or created a lot of chances in the first round, maybe which players didn't. And so I'm tentatively using first round data, but again, all the games came against the same team, so you got to be careful with
Yeah,
guys who had big
yeah.
performances.
And I would say like the stats within a team can tell you a lot. Like who's shooting relative to, which Blackhawk forward is shooting more than other Blackhawk forwards. Which Tampa Bay defenseman is on the ice for more shorthanded time on ice than other Tampa Bay defensemen, et cetera, et cetera. Like within own teams, you're more than fine to look at stats. It's just, I look, just for example, I looked at the Columbus One's numbers against the Leafs, and their pace was just astronomical.
Yeah.
Like I'm talking like 50% higher than the regular season. It just won't maintain itself against in a matchup against Tampa like it did with the Leafs.
Yeah, for sure. So just something to think about as you continue to play NHL DFS over these next few weeks. Should be a lot of fun. a lot of 4 and 5 game, or I think it's a lot of 4-game slates. They'll play kind of every other day for hopefully the next 2 weeks if we can get some game 7s in
Hopefully
here.
for like 7 months.
Honestly,
get us through to like April.
Yeah, please, anything. So let's start with the rematch of last year, over a year ago, about a year and a half ago actually now. Blue Jackets and the Tampa Bay Lightning. The slates will lock at 3 Eastern today, so you got a little bit of time after the show to get your lineups in. You're going to want to be around at 2:30 Eastern for rushes because we've got some question marks. Big one is Victor Hedman. You see him kind of not registering on the page here. He's questionable for this game. I don't know if he's going to play. I made some lineups like he was going to play. What I'm probably going to do with him is just play him only in Tampa Bay stacks and then take him out quick if I need to, so I don't have to redo all my lineups on all these different sites that I'm playing on. Did I mention the implied total for the Lightning? Anyways, 3 implied total for Lightning, 2.4 for the Jackets. It's going to be Korpisalo and Vasilevsky as your goalies. What do you see as the matchups in this game? Are we going to see some Cirelli against the Pierre-Luc Dubois line, or do you think they're going to go with Point Kucherov, Palat? And then, regardless, what are you looking at from an NHL DFS perspective in this game?
Yeah, I use a line matching sheet from a fellow Dauber writer of mine. His name's Adam Daly Fry. If you want to subscribe, you can just contact me and I'll put you in touch. But basically, he has them matching 1, 2, 3 straight down. So the point line up against Dubois, Cirelli against Jenner, and so on and so forth. Maybe towards during the game we'll try to get counter matchups or something like that, but I wouldn't try to lean into those too hard. I'm with you. I have a couple lineups with Victor Hedman because I think this is the earliest game on the slate, right? It starts at 3 Eastern. So there are going to be people playing that are still at work, or maybe they're in traffic, or et cetera, won't be able to check their lineups. A lot of people are just not going to play them because they don't want to deal with that headache. And that's going to be the case for other players we're going to talk about later on the show. So I do have some Hedman lineups just because A, it's the first game of the slate, and B, people won't be checking. So even if I need to take him out and I need to, it is a pain to have to rewire 15 lineups, in the final 10 minutes before lock. But I think it's worth it because if Hedman is in, I think you'll get him a lot lower ownership than he probably should be. And if he's out, then you can configure lineups a lot easier. What I will say is that I don't have a lot. I have 20 lineups going right now. I have 2 with Hedman. And even I think that's a little bit much because this is an ankle injury for a big lumbering defenseman, right? Like this is a guy that if he doesn't have his mobility, if he doesn't have his speed, he's basically just a Hal Gill, right? Like I don't want to denigrate him that much because Victor Hedman's, he's a Norris contending defenseman. But if he can't move laterally, if he can't skate with the puck, that takes away everything that makes Victor Hedman special. So does he become anything more than an outlet pass guy or, a nuisance on the power play or something like that? So it's not one of those situations where I think it's a massive leverage play just because even if he's in, he's probably hurt, and that's not a good thing anyway, and it's not a great matchup, et cetera, et cetera. So I have a couple shares of Victor Hedman. I'm just not going overboard like I tend to do sometimes when I think there may be an edge. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, sorry. I was just agreeing. I don't think you need to go overboard with Hedman. Bobby in chat says, if you're going to take Hedman out, are you changing that whole Tampa stack or only Hedman?
I'd just change Hedman.
Me too.
Yeah, I just move him down to Sergachev and then look elsewhere in your lineup. Is there another defenseman you can upgrade? Can you upgrade a one-off winger from 3,500 to 5,500 or something like that? That's what I would be looking for. To me, Sergachev is as good offensively, close to as Hedman is. Like Sergachev is stupid good offensively. He's just hidden in Tampa Bay behind Hedman and Sergachev, or Hedman and McDonough and all those guys. Like there's just so many names there. People always forget about him, but he is a really good puck moving defenseman.
Yep. What about the Columbus side? You got anything you want to talk about there?
Yeah, the third line has really started to interest me. Foudy and Riley Nash and Oliver Bjorkstrand. And it's because, what's that?
I like it. I like Foudy. I don't know why. But he always
Foudy or
pops
Foodie?
me. I,
Is it Foudy or Foodie?
I don't remember.
Because there's a Julie Foudy that was a soccer player for the U.S. women's team years and years ago. But
Or
in
no,
the
it's Foodie. It's Foodie because I remember Doc Emmerich saying it.
Okay.
I
All right.
think.
Liam Foodie. I do like that line. Foodie was a guy that he was a prospect for them, and it I don't want to say that he wasn't going to make it, but he's certainly not the type of player that Torts generally embraces. But he certainly showed tremendous strides in that Toronto series. He was creating offense by himself. I thought Oliver Bjorkstrand started the series pretty poorly the first 2-3 games. He was basically invisible. He really came on in the last couple. So I do like that Columbus third line of Foodie, Bjorkstrand, and Nash. I just don't know if you need a 3-man stack them. Like Foodie and Bjorkstrand would be fine, or Bjorkstrand as a one-off, or Foodie as a one-off, or something like that. I'm just going to get some pieces of that line. I'm not going to stack them all together. That's basically all I'm looking at from the Columbus side, because they went to a top line of Dubois, Atkinson, and Foodie in the last game. That was the third line for the entire third period, or the top line for the entire third period. Sorry. So I assume Teixeira is going to be back on the top line, but is he going to stay there for a period, 2 periods, all 3 periods? I mean, it's Torts, man. We just don't know. So I'm more banking on one-offing Foodie or one-offing Bjorkstrand than I am stacking that line as a whole.
Yeah, I like the call on Columbus 3 getting to go up against the not weak but weaker Tampa Bay lines. If it is Nash, Foodie, and Bjorkstrand together, I think the Foodie Bjorkstrand 2-man is pretty appealing. Ray Rock says maybe you could play him with Jones. I kind of like that call as well. So just kind of secondary pieces for the Blue Jackets for me in this game. He's even as a multi-entry player. Like if Foodie is up on the Dubois and Atkinson line, I may have some of those just because it's going to be a combo that not a lot of people will get to. If that's the case in pregame skate. But just real tough matchups here for Columbus. Low total, going up against the point line, the Dubois line. I don't know. They played really well in the first series, but I think they're going to have a real tough time with Point Plot and Kucherov. And then kind of same thing for the Jenner, Nyquist, Foligno line. So not a lot of exposure. For me on the Columbus side, what are you doing with Jones and Werenski here before we move on?
Yeah, I want to talk about the defenseman real quick. One was Werenski was injured in game 4 and left, and then he came back for game 5. Now, he played over 20 minutes, but it's worth noting that he played less than David Savard did. He actually played about 15 seconds less than Savard. So obviously, and earlier in the series when he was healthy, Werenski was over 25 minutes every single game, and he was down to 21 last game. So obviously, and that was an elimination game to get to the playoffs. So obviously, there's something still going on with Werenski.
Mm-hmm.
There's something still wrong there. There's a reason why he played 22 minutes in his last game as opposed to 25, 28, or 30 that he played earlier in the series. And it's because he's still hurt. He has to be. So I'm cooled on Werenski. I think a lot of people are going to treat him as if, he's in the same situation he was a week ago, and that's not the case. So I'm out on Werenski. I have some one-off Jones, but more I'm in on Savard. It's just a price thing. There's just in my lineups that I built, I need some cheaper defensemen. So Savard is the guy I'm targeting because I think he's definitely a threat to push, 23, 24, maybe 25 minutes, depending on how Werenski's feeling.
Yeah, I'm in agreement there. Jones, kind of my favorite guy in Columbus if you can get up there. But Savard is another guy I'm targeting. Although DK has kind of reacted to his price pretty quickly here, $4,600. He was well below 4K. I think even the last slate. And then Jones is $4,900 on FanDuel as well.
I mean, I guess like if the Savard 4,600 is too expensive for you, then Gavrikov would probably be the guy because even he played over 20 minutes in their last game.
$3,300. Yeah, I can get behind some of that as well.
In game 5 against Toronto, he was over 20 minutes as well. He was kind of the main beneficiary to Werenski's minutes going down.
So, where does Tampa 1, the point line, kind of rank on all of your hierarchy of lines tonight? We'll get to the main event, but this might be a good opportunity to talk about in general, where does Vegas rank for you compared to Boston 1 compared to the Tampa 1?
Yeah, I mean, there are other factors like you want to factor in price
Hmm.
and ownership, expected ownership, and all that. But I have Tampa as my number 4 line today.
Okay.
So, like, I have a good healthy mix of Tampa one, but they're of my like I usually build around 4 big lines. Of my 4, they're my least favorite.
Got it.
So,
I think they're close to Boston one for me in terms of exposure. Um, Tampa, Boston, then Vegas. Everyone's gonna get a piece of that, including myself. But I'm about right at where the field is on Tampa one, which I feel pretty comfortable with. Let's go to Calgary and Dallas. 2.5 implied total for the Flames. 2.8 for the Stars. Cam Talbot and Ben Bishop are your expected goalies. Who knows if it actually is going to be Bishop? I've got him in there though. I think he's a little bit more expensive than Qdoban on some of the sites. So better safe than sorry. Tyler Seguin is supposed to be back for the Stars. Looks like he's ready to go with Hintz and Ben. So we're expecting them to play. And then it feels like we haven't talked about Calgary in a while because they took care of the Jets pretty quickly. So they've had quite a layoff, but they were impressive against the Jets in that series. Kind of took care of business when Scheifele and Line went down, and they were popular on a number of slates. Here, low totals, 2.5 for Calgary, 2.8 for the Stars. This seems like the least interesting game of the slate, but with only 4 remaining, is there anything you're targeting heavily?
no. I mean, I do have a good amount of Pittsburgh. Geez, they're not even in the playoffs anymore. Of Calgary too. Um, the thing with this, we talked about in the last round about how slow of a pace the Stars play. And, they really didn't score a lot of goals. They didn't show much in the round robin games. But again, how much those round robin teams are taking this seriously, I really don't know. Um, the thing is Dallas is the home team here, and when they're the home team, they typically use Faxa and Como, that line, as the shutdown line. They don't use Sagan and Ben as the shutdown line, and that's a problem actually, because you'd want them on this slate going up
Mm-hmm.
against Lindholm and Monahan and Gaudreau, but they're not. They're going to go up against Backlund and Kachuk and Manjapane,
So dumb.
and that's brutal. Like, that's a really bad matchup to have to eat. And that's why, like, I was kind of excited to use. I was actually going to use the new Dallas top line, or the reassembled Dallas top line today. And then I checked the matchups, and I'm like, I'm not going to go into that Backlund Kachuk matchup. That's just a brutal matchup, and it has been for years. It's gotten a little bit better this year, but things really stabilized after they added Andrew Mangiapane to that line. So I'm out on Dallas one. I'm out. I mean, I want to say I want to use one off Guryanov or something like that, but that's probably about as far as I'm going to get on Dallas. One off Guryanov, one off Hintz, something like that. I'm going to have a reasonable amount of John Klingberg, or not John Klingberg, Miro Heiskanen, sorry. But that's about it. Like, it's just the way that the Dallas Stars deploy their lines. They they use their depth players to eat the tough matchups, but in this instance, it's actually going to leave them worse off. Um, like I said, one off Guryanov, one off Hintz, one off Heiskanen. That's about it that I'm going to have from Dallas. On the Calgary side, I'm on the second line. I don't, Tyler Seguin missing 2 out of 3 games makes me think that there's something going on. I think that they want to at least get him 2 games in to practice, to get, shake the rust off. That he only got 1 game makes me think there's something going on. And we know Jamie Benn's over the hill. Alex Radulov is still pretty good, but one winger can't carry a line. So Backlund, Kachuk, Manjapane, I do have a fair bit of them. I think I have a couple lineups where I've just gone to Calgary power play stacks. So maybe it's Kachuk with Lindholm and Monahan or something like that. But I don't have any 3-man Calgary top line stacks. I don't have any Dallas 3-man top line stacks. I'm going to stay away from Giordano. I know Giordano was a guy that we used, I think at least I used a fair bit in the last round, and it kind of worked out. But this is a matchup where I think if Dallas ever gets blown out, like allows 4, 5, 6 goals or something like that, it's going to have to be Calgary's power play that gets it done. They're not going to put up a ton of even strength goals against this team. So just generally speaking, this series, I'm going to have more Gustafsson than I did last round, and I like him again here tonight.
Yeah, I'm with you on Calgary too. Looks like they're gonna have a okay matchup, and they're just a good 5-on-5 line. So I always like playing those guys, especially when Mangiapane gets left off time and time again. But oftentimes he's the guy who scores the goal or the couple goals, or at least he's in on it. He's not Zach Cassian or Josh Archibald. Like,
Yeah,
don't
exactly.
leave him off.
Yes,
On
he's
purpose.
like that's one thing to get clear. He's not just some straight third wheel. He's actually a decent player. So you can leave him off. Obviously, he's the third best player on that line, but he's earned that spot.
Yeah, 100%. So I usually leave him on whenever I can. The Calgary line, I'm just worried that they're going to go up against Faxa, Cagliano, Como. It is a fourth line, but they do play a decent amount, and they do a good job of kind of just slowing the pace. So that makes it tough for me to get to a lot of Calgary 1 here. I guess Dallas, like, I have to play something having 150 lineups. I'm not just going all in on Vegas. And, like, you have to play Vegas and all these other lines with someone. Dallas 1 is cheap. Dual centers aren't, like, it's not going to decrease their ownership on DK because of the utility spot, maybe a little bit on FanDuel. I don't know. They're just way too cheap, and hopefully they get some time against the third line for Calgary or something like that. Because if they're going straight into the Backlund line, that's pretty difficult. So if you're looking to play Dallas, maybe you go with Seguin, Ben, Hintz, and another forward, Radulov, like you said, and Klingberg, and just hope they can score a handful of goals here against Talbot. That's about the best I could do with Dallas. They're not very appealing for DFS, but they're going to get some ownership, and I understand why, just because of their prices. But the matchups are not good for the line you actually want to play here.
No, and that's the big problem is that they're 200 IQing themselves out of a good
Yep.
matchup. If they just stack, top line against top line, I think they could handle the Monahan line, but I don't think it's going to work out in their favor. One last thing I wanted to note is that Calgary, I mean, maybe it was just a function of who they were playing in that playing round, but they really spread out their TOI among their forwards. Their first forward through their ninth forward were only separated by 2 minutes at 5-on-5. So, like, Dylan Dubé was only playing like 2 minutes less than Johnny Gaudreau. So, like,
Got to get
I have
extra
some
time.
yeah, I have some one-off Dylan Dubé today, actually. And some one-off, is it Derek Ryan's on that line? I believe it's Derek Ryan.
Sam Bennett is what I'm seeing.
Sam Bennett, that's it. And some one-off Sam Bennett. Just because I think once you get into that second and third line from or the depth pairs from Dallas, they can do a little bit of damage, but it's mostly just a time on ice thing. They're playing way more ice. They're getting more ice time than they should, so may as well take advantage of it while you can.
Fair enough. Lucic on a 4-game point streak. Is that right? That's got to be his first one in like 3 or 4 years.
Like, that line's been good this year. You know what I mean? Like, it's crazy. You'd think a line with, Lucic and Dylan Dubé or something would be, and Sam Bennett would be bad, and it's not. They've been good. So you can't just laugh. I mean, you can't just laugh away Lucic. As weird as that is.
It is pretty weird to think about. Just absolutely dirt cheap. I don't think you need to play the full stack necessarily.
Yeah, I'm not playing him. I'm not stacking the line. It's one-offs, like one-off Bennett, one-off Dubé. But, man, it's just crazy.
It's a Boston 1 slate, maybe. So you never know. A little Calgary 3 in your life.
Maybe the next slate.
Yeah. Just quick on the defenseman. Heiskanen, I will play it once again as more of a one-off guy for 4,700. Klingberg, I'm playing just with Dallas. And then Gio not playing on the top power play makes it more of a one-off play similar to Heiskanen and Dallas. And then Gustafsson's your guy if you're going with the Calgary top line here or something.
Yeah, and that's one thing I probably should mention too. I don't hate Giordano as a one-off in this type of game, right? Because he'll get no ownership And if they could win 3-1, he has a goal and assist with a couple different lines. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like that's just because a line doesn't go off doesn't mean he can't have a monster game. It's just there are just other defensemen I'm targeting, but it's one of those things. I certainly understand somebody want to go out and get 10 or 15% Giordano and be way overweight.
Yep, that's what I like here as well. Let's go to Carolina and Boston. 2.6 implied total for the Hurricanes, 2.8 for the Bruins. Peter Mrazek and Tuukka Rask are going to be your goalies. Carolina, another team with a long layoff. I think a full week, you said before the show. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly 1 week today.
Yeah, and then Boston looked terrible. Lost all three, so they get the toughest matchup you could imagine for a team that had the best regular season record by like 8 points. So weird stuff going on here. You want to talk about what you think about this series in terms of like the public opinion here, based on
Yeah, I think there's like this is a narrative. This is a data-driven show. It's a data-driven website. Data drives what we do. That's why we talk about projections and ownership rates, et cetera, et cetera. The data on teams coming off a bye. Now, the league instituted bye weeks. What was it? 2016, 17, I believe it was.
So. Yeah.
Yeah. So, anyways, what it was teams at a certain point of the season, a block of teams will go on bye. They get 5 days off or 7 days off or whatever it was. They could go on vacation or whatever, and then come back, and then they resume their regular season. But we found that teams coming off that bye were generally just getting slaughtered. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me. I know Travis Diost at TSN did an article about it, and it was like anytime a team with more than 4 days off played a team that had 3 or fewer days off, like their winning percentage went down like 4%. They were allowing more goals against. They were scoring less, et cetera, et cetera. It's bad. And we don't have a monster sample because it's 30 teams on bye for 4 years, so 120 teams. But it does seem to look like teams gather rust pretty fast. Now, on the flip side, and don't forget, Carolina hasn't played in a week, so they certainly fit our bill of 5 days or more. Now, on the flip side, Boston, they did look terrible in the playing rounds. But as you mentioned before our show, the Boston fancy stats, at least for the top line, weren't bad. They were quite good. And the other thing I want to bring up is the 2015 Chicago Blackhawks. Now, we're going to have a little story time here. The 2015 Chicago Blackhawks won the Stanley Cup. About 3/4 of the way through the season, they started resting their players, and they started backing minutes down. They started giving guys healthy scratches. Their final 10 games, they went basically 50-50, starting their backup goalie. They basically coasted for the final 2 months of the season. And I remember distinctly, articles and columns. What's wrong with the Blackhawks? The Blackhawks are faltering. They're falling behind the other teams. They don't look sharp. They're not building up momentum going into the playoffs, yada, yada, yada. 2 months later, they won the Stanley Cup. I think that's the exact same thing the Bruins are doing here. In fact, we saw those comments from Brad Marchand in an interview yesterday. He said specifically that they were preseason games. They did not care about them whatsoever. All they wanted to do was get some hockey in and make sure everybody was healthy for the first round. I think you're going to see Boston look like Boston here in this game. And I also think because of the narrative that has been built up where Carolina stomped the Rangers in 3 games, they were the only team to sweep, et cetera, et cetera. Boston looked bad. They didn't look like themselves, et cetera, et cetera. I think you're going to see a lot lower ownership on Boston 1 than there should be on a 4-game slate like this. And that makes me want to roster a lot of Boston 1. And in fact, I have my highest exposure is to some combination of Boston 1. I do have just 3-man stacks. I have power play stacks that add in Torrey Krug. I have penalty kill stacks with just Bergeron and Marchand. But I have a lot of Boston 1 here in this game. 1, because I think the narrative is going to keep their ownership down. 2, because the data says that teams coming off a bye are generally very bad, and that would be Carolina today. And 3, like if you're going to get Boston 1 at lower ownership at a pretty reasonable price considering where they usually are, I think you're doing a disservice by at least not getting some of your exposure there.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So I think that the most important thing, as it usually is for me with Boston, in these large field tournaments is just Boston 1 is just avoiding some of the more highly owned lines, and you can pick these out based on our ownership projections. Third lines that are going to get 4 and 6% ownership. Just kind of avoid those super popular combinations, or do something weird with your defenseman or your goalie. Maybe don't correlate your goalie. But yeah, I'm of the opinion that this is Boston 1, and I think you're getting a discount on them. I think they're going to be stuck on the Aho, Svechnikov, Teravainen line. That's not the greatest matchup in the world, but I don't think it's a below average one. And so, yeah, I think they show them who's boss here. And I agree. Why would they care about that game? I know it's not optimal to face Carolina. They're a really good team, and they could beat Boston. But that matchup specifically, when Boston's going to be on home ice, I think that's really going to limit what Carolina 1 can do in these road games.
Yeah, and the thing is like this, the Carolina 1, if you want to score goals, that's probably the line you want to get matched up against, honestly. Because they're the line, they're great at driving offense, and that's why their fancy stats look great, but their defensive numbers are a little bit below average. Now, because they generate so much offense, they still look great, and it doesn't really matter. But all that matters for our purposes is their defensive ability.
Yep.
And it's not that great. And I'd rather have I'd rather have Boston 1 go up against them than, the Trocheck line or the Stahl and Williams combo, especially.
Yeah.
I think this is a good matchup for Boston 1, so I'm going to get them in there. On the flip side, I do like this spot for Carolina 3, and I do believe
Are you talking about, real quick, the Trocheck?
Yeah, Trocheck, Natchez.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm talking about Trocheck, Natchez, Niederreiter. Sorry, it's just the way I have them lined up on my.
No,
I got to stop.
They switch around on ours too. So
yeah, it's just Boston's third line is probably going to match up against Carolina's. Carolina's third line has perfect power play correlation. Trocheck and Natchez, at least, have looked very good together. They've had a rotation of different line mates. I know Natchez has been off that line at times too, but I found like Trocheck has been pretty good at doing the dirty work, and Natchez has been pretty good at setting up the plays. Just from watching them play. So I do have one out of 20 of my lineups is a game stack. It's Boston 1 with Carolina 3.
Okay.
And I do like that Carolina third line. If you're going super expensive, Point, Kucherov, Hedman, that kind of stack, and you do need to pay down, Trocheck and Niederreiter or Trocheck and Natchez or something like that is a fine secondary stack today, I think.
Yeah, I agree with you on that Carolina line and the Trocheck line. Usually don't look at PP2 as much. I usually don't. But it still matters. Like if you're going to be fully correlated and you're super cheap like this, just a little extra bump. Plus, they're not going to get the toughest matchup here. It's
just all the power plays too, right?
Yeah.
Like you'd like to think that they're going to start not calling as many in the first round, but like I don't see them just completely deviating from their standard of officiating they've established already. Mm-hmm. Like I don't think they do that all of a sudden on a whim. So, I don't really like stacking PP2 guys either, but if they end up with 5, 6, or 7 power plays, hopefully it can work out.
Dougie Hamilton is officially questionable. Sounds like he's playing though.
They said he's warming up, and the coach said he expects him to play. Yeah.
So he's gonna take his role on power play 1. Maybe that's how Carolina 1 could get there. You play Carolina 1 plus Hamilton, and you hope for a bunch of penalties. Maybe they somehow scrap together, like they catch Boston in a bad matchup. And scrap together an even strength goal or something, because Carolina 1's awesome. I'm not saying you have to avoid them entirely if you're building a ton of lineups. It's just like you need to know that this matchup really stinks for them at 5-on-5. I'm playing Hamilton as a one-off, similar to what we said with Giordano, just a guy that if they score a couple goals, he could easily be in on both of them, whether it's an assist or a goal and an assist. Are you worried about his minutes at all? And then anything else you want to mention in this game?
No, I'm not too worried about the minutes. One thing I did want to mention is I know people don't like playing Slavin just because he's not on power play 1 or sometimes on power play 2. But that guy just plays minutes. He shoots, he blocks, he does everything that people want to do. I think he's kind of like that pivot that if you have a higher owned stack somewhere, like if you are playing chalk Vegas and you are playing, chalk Calgary or something like that, or chalk, I don't even know who. Yeah, Calgary's chalk.
The top line, yeah,
Yeah.
which is weird.
So so if you're playing the chalk, like Slavin would be one of the defensemen that I would use to kind of differentiate a little bit, because Dougie Hamilton's gonna have 5 times the ownership that he will, or something like that, or 4 times the ownership.
Yeah.
Oh, Slavin's a guy I always try to sneak in a lineup or two.
Man, I wonder. It's always hard to project these guys that are in the later part of the slate, like how owned they'll actually be.
Yeah, it's
I don't
true.
know. I like Hamilton just as a player, and so I got to about 20% of Dougie right now. I think that's okay. If you're worried about his minutes and you've got a lineup that's doing well in the first couple games, because you're going to know like half the slate's going to be done by the time you have to make a decision with him. You could always swap to a guy you feel better about, like Nate Schmidt or Shea Theodore or someone in the late slate, and leave some salary on the table. So there's going to be options for Dougie. So I also just think he's a perfectly fine one-off regardless of what his ownership's going to be, because it's not going to be very high here. Anyone on the Boston side, do you mind playing Krug as a one-off, or is he strictly Boston 1 plus Krug?
Yeah, Krug is a guy that I'm not playing him unless he's in a stack, but Charlie McAvoy is kind of like that alternative.
Okay.
Like, I think Charlie McAvoy flat out is one of the 10 best defensemen in hockey right now. And he's always hitting on that team because they always talk about Bergeron, Pasternak, Marchand, etc. He was the one guy that looked good in their round robin games, I thought. Like, it generally looked like he was taking them serious, trying to shake off some rust, moving the puck and rushing the puck, et cetera, et cetera. McAvoy is a guy, he doesn't shoot a ton, so I don't think you can really hope for that 5-shot bonus. But he does block shots, and he does get up in the play a lot. He loves jumping up in the play. He's a very good puck mover. He's very good in transition. So McAvoy is a guy that I'm using he's one of my favorite one-off defensemen here today.
And you could play McAvoy pretty comfortably with Boston 1 because he skates a ton with them at 5-on-5. It's not the power play correlation that Krug has, but if you can't get up to Krug and you want to save $500, just stick McAvoy in your Boston 1 stack.
Yep.
All right, let's go to
the main event.
The main event. Here it is. It feels like every single slate we've had since the restart, the late game is always chalk, and that's likely because Blackhawks have been playing in these late games. And we've got a 2.7 implied total for the Blackhawks, 3.8 for the Golden Knights. Crawford and Leonard, 2 teammates, just a few short months ago. Chicago had their fun in the series. They got the first round series, got the W in 4 games against Edmonton, closed out McDavid and Draisaitl pretty quickly. Here they're going to play Vegas, the number 1 seed, that was an awesome game against Colorado, by the way. Best round robin game, one of the best games of the first round. That game rocked. And Vegas is awesome. What are you doing here? Vegas is chalk. Like, everybody can see that. They're huge favorites. Highest total on the slate by a mile. They've got 2 lines, though, and maybe a third line if you wanted to play one of their depth lines. At least Alex Tuck at 4K. What are you doing with this game here?
Yeah, Tuck is one of my favorite one-offs. We'll just get that out of the way first. Okay. So, Vegas is obviously going to be super chalky, and we got to figure out what we want to do with them. Now, I have a lot of Vegas, too. I'm just not fading. I don't have the guts.
Carlson line? Carlson, Stone, Pacioretty?
Yeah,
they're flipped on ours.
Yeah. Yep. I don't have the guts to fade this game. No, you know what I mean? I don't have the guts to fade that line either. So Vegas Carlson, Stone, Pacioretty line, it's my highest owned line. I'm fine. There are a ton of third lines that I like tonight. So I have one Vegas onslaught where I have them with Vegas 3. I have one where I have them with Carolina 3. I have them with one with Calgary 3, with Tampa Bay 3. There's a Foodie Bjorkstrand Savard stack I think I have. So I'm trying to get Vegas 2 in as many different combinations as I can, but I don't. Vegas 3 is is the most interesting line to me from that side for three reasons. One, they're cheap. Two, the ownership. Three is the matchup. Now that Chicago has kind of shuffled their lines and moved Dylan Strome down to the third line and Alex DeBrincat up to the second, that third line is trash. Kajula, Strome, and Nylander, there's not a defensive bone in their body between the three of them. So with Chandler Stevenson moving down to the third line because Max Pacioretty's back for Vegas, so the third line's now Tuck Stevenson and presumably Nick Roy. I really like that Vegas third line. Now, again, I mean, maybe this is a situation where you can stack because there could be enough goals where, all that line needs is one goal and then maybe Tuck gets one on the power play, something like that. And then all of a sudden that line's crushing for value. So I think you're fine with three-man stacking them. I'm using mostly one-offs. Alex Tuck mainly. I think I've one Chandler Stevenson one-off, but I do like that Vegas. That Vegas third line is my favorite filler line of the night just because I think they just run right over Chicago's third line. But I think people are kind of undervaluing the Chicago side here. I'm not going to be in on the second line, Kane, Doc, DeBrincat, because I think that Stone Pacioretty line is Stone Pacioretty and Carlson, like, it's pretty close to the best line in hockey, maybe the top five. I don't want anything to do with that matchup. Stasny, Marchessault, and Riley Smith, though, I don't mind going into that matchup with Taves, Saad, and Kubalik.
Yeah.
Like, Taves, Saad, and Kubalik are an excellent offensive line. Excellent. Flat out, period. Excellent offensive line. I'll take that matchup at, what do we have them? I think it's 4% ownership, 5% ownership.
I like
almost nothing. And 2 out of the 3 of them play on the power play together. They're not expensive. The 3 of them come in under 15K together. So you can go expensive defenseman. You can go find another expensive stack somewhere. You can do stuff. They allow you to do a lot of things. Like, I have a Chicago 1, Boston 1 stack. You know what I mean? Like, that's
nice.
That's how cheap everything is. If you can fit those 2 lines in with a couple $3,000 defensemen. So Vegas 2 is my highest owned stack. Boston 1's not far behind Vegas 2. I mean, Carlson, Stone, Pacioretty, and then Boston 1 is not far behind them. And then I have Chicago 1 as my third highest owned stack on the slate. So,
you worried about Leonard at all?
Oh, I'm terrified of Leonard, but it's goaltending.
Yeah, true.
You know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to rely on Vegas. I think Vegas's top pair got 950 goaltending. I mean, if they get 950 goaltending, I'll tip my cap and I'll say, here's my donation. That's fine. But I'm going to take anytime on a 4-game slate, anytime I can get that Chicago line at 4 or 5%, almost regardless of matchup, I'm going to have a fair bit of them. And so that's why Chicago 1 is kind of like my favorite sneaky stack of the day.
Yeah, and
even though it's not that sneaky. They're the top line, for God's sake.
Right. I love the call on Chicago 1. I think everyone knows where I'm at on Vegas. Vegas, the Carlson line, whether you call them Vegas 1 or Vegas 2, I think I agree. One of the better lines in all the NHL. Play them basically every slate, regardless of matchup. It couldn't be much of a better matchup. So maybe Crawford can stand on his head, but I don't think there's any scenario in which the Carlson line doesn't generate a ton of chances all series long. Even better if they're going to go up against Kane and DeBrincat. So yeah, Vegas Carlson line, my highest exposed line right now. But with that being said, I don't think I'm going to be much over the field on them. It's just going to be a matter of what you do with the rest of your lineup, because they're a terrifying fade. I wouldn't do that if you're even playing a handful of lineups. You could drop down to the Stastny, Marchessault, Smith line, but they're also going to be popular just because of their price and the implied total. You can Josh stack here. That looks like a really appealing option, whether you go Carlson line and the second line or even the third line. I think you can mix in there. There's just so many forwards that are going to be good plays for Vegas, and it's possible that the top 2 lines generate a ton of chances, get a bunch of shots, but don't finish goals, or when they do finish goals, they're not the right guys assisting. So things could go poorly, for that reason. But I just think Vegas is going to destroy Chicago this series. Um,
I'm with you, but how much Crawford do you have today then?
so that's a lot of my. Let's see.
He can
That's
see
actually a good
50
question.
shots.
Yeah, exactly. I just worry about the quality of shots that he's gonna face.
Okay, yeah,
So I
that's a
think,
fair point.
yeah, I think he was the lowest. Let's see. It's not going to be a lot, whatever it is. So right now, if the slate started right now, I would have 6% Crawford.
And
10 lineups out of 150.
that's probably high, isn't it?
Yeah, and
Compared. Oh
no,
no,
that's
we haven't.
that's lower than what we have projected at. By the way, our ownership projections are free today. If you guys want to check those out, hopefully we can get another run before lock. There was something else I was going to mention. Oh, this being the last game on the slate, I think if you like if the first part of your lineup, let's say you're only playing a couple lineups, but even if you're playing a lot, if you're hurting on the first few games of the slate, or you fade Boston one, or I'm sorry, you don't have whatever line goes off in the first few games, you should be swapping to that Tays line or just Vegas three, regardless of the salary you have on the table, because there's just going to be so much ownership concentrated on Vegas's top two lines that you need to give yourself a chance at a cash or to compete in the tournament. So
Yeah,
I'll probably end up with more Chicago than I start the slate with, just because there's going to be some lineups that are dead, but they have Vegas top two lines in them. Outside of that, yeah, I like the Tays line, getting the better matchup against the Stastny line. Hard for me to play a lot of Doc DeBrincat Kane, even though it's a line we loved. It had success. Doc looks like he's taking that next step. But yeah, this one screams Vegas to me, and I'm getting in some Leonard. The problem with him is that he's 8,200 and probably won't face a ton of volume.
yeah. I mean, I'm the same way. I have more Crawford than I do Leonard. I think I'm 15% Crawford and 10% Leonard. There's a lot of goalies that are expensive at the top that to me they're all interchangeable. You know what I mean? Like Vasilevsky and Rask and Leonard. Like I don't see a huge difference for me between the three of them on this
Yeah.
slate. So
I like playing Crawford maybe with one of the Chicago lines if you like the Doc line, or we like the Tays line, because you're getting a cheap Chicago line. They have to win the game for Crawford to matter on this slate. But if they win it 4-3 or 4-2, Crawford's probably going to see 35, 40, maybe even more saves. And at that point, the goals allowed don't really matter, even if it's 4 goals, because of the DraftKings bonus. So he's a super high upside, very high risk option. But those are the ones you want to target on DraftKings, anyways. What do you think
Great.
happens in all these series? And do you want to mention any defensemen?
uh, I don't have a lot of defensemen from this game outside of the expensive guys.
Yeah, Shea and
There's just not a lot. The one guy that I did want to mention was Calvin DeHaan. I think he had 10 block shots in 4 games in the first round and hit the bonus in 2 out of the 4. He's a shot blocking machine, and Vegas is going to take a ton of shots. I don't see any way that. I mean, I shouldn't say I don't see any way DeHaan doesn't reach the shot block bonus, but it seems pretty likely that he gets there often in these games.
Yep.
And if he ever has a game with an assist, all of a sudden he's at like 12 points for 3,500 or whatever. So
Same thing for me with Murphy, but I have both Murphy and Don scattered throughout my lineups here. You want to make any predictions about these 4 series so far? Tampa, Columbus, who you got?
yeah, I did my predictions this morning over. I do
Oh,
season long
wonderful.
fantasy hockey at dauberhockey.com, and I had, if I'm not mistaken, I had Tampa in 6, Calgary in 6, Carolina in 7,
Whoa.
and Vegas in 5. Yeah, I have them going over Boston. I think, you know what this reminds me? The Carolina Boston series. It reminds me of was it Pittsburgh and Ottawa back in the late aughts, like 2007, 2008, 2009. Pittsburgh was the up and coming team, and Ottawa was the established team. Believe it or not, at that time, because remember Ottawa had Alfredson and Heatley and all those guys. And Pittsburgh lost to Ottawa one year in the playoffs. It was either in 4 or 5 games. And then, of course, it was a year later. Crosby's a year older, Malkin's a year older, et cetera, et cetera. They went back and beat them, I think, in the second round of the playoffs or the third round of the playoffs the next year. I think you're going to see something like this where Carolina's a team on the up, Boston's a team on the down, and after getting stomped by them last year, you're going to see them overcome the obstacle this year. It's just kind of history repeating itself. I like to look for patterns.
I like it. Man, it just seems like everyone's on Carolina now after they swept, and then Boston looked terrible. So
but that's what makes DFS great, right? Is
yeah,
that's good news for us.
exactly. Yeah, you want to take advantage of the recency bias. I'd probably go Boston 7 there. I like Vegas, obviously. I think I'm taking pretty much all the favorites. I like Vegas in like 5. I don't see how Chicago competes in that series. And then and Stars Flames. I'll go with the Flames just because I hope the Stars don't stick around
Hope they both
too
lose.
long. Yeah. And then I think Tampa is gonna finish off Columbus in 5 or 6 here. There's no way that same thing happens again. Like there's no way Columbus beats him again.
I mean, if Stamkos is hurt and Hedman's playing at 80% or whatever,
yeah,
that's why I felt bad picking Tampa. I was like, they swept them last year, and this year they don't have Stamkos or Hedman. I'm still picking Tampa.
Yeah, it doesn't sound too great when you put it like that.
No.
But if you guys want to drop your predictions in the comments once this video is done processing, feel free. I'd love to see what you guys are all thinking. Go support Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports, whether you're playing MLB, NHL. They're running some of these no management fee contests, which are awesome. They don't really happen for DFS, but Yahoo is. They are running them, and they're not super competitive. So I think if you use the tools on the site, you're going to have a good chance to make a little bit of money, build your bankroll. You can use promo code Awesemo to get up to $30 in Yahoo Sports rewards points. When you do join over on Yahoo, make better choices. Choose Yahoo Daily Fantasy. Anything else before we get out of here?
Yeah, I have one last guy I want to say. One of my favorite one-offs on the whole slate, Justin Williams.
Oh, all right. There you go. Not going to be very owned. If you want to check out our ownership projections, I will drop this link in chat. There you go. Those are free today, as are the MLB and the NBA ones. So enjoy. Golf show coming on a little bit later this afternoon. We've got MLB Live Before Lock this evening. And then be around in Slack right before lock. That's going to be in about an hour or so. We'll get lines for the Tampa-Columbus game. Should be another fun day. Should be another fun couple weeks of NHL DFS. Thanks for joining, everybody.
Good luck tonight, everyone.